Hello, this is Joe Polish, president of Piranha Marketing and founder of the Genius Network interview series, and you're about to hear one of my Genius Network interviews, and I just want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this, and I hope you find it very useful. If you want to find out more information about some of the interviews and resources that can help you in your business, you can go to www.joepolish.com. And we have a Joe Polish Recommends section with all kinds of resources and vendors and services and products that we recommend that can help you in your business. And also for more useful interviews and a whole list of other people that I've interviewed, you can go to www.geniusnetwork.com. Thanks and enjoy the interview.
Hello, this is Joe Polish, and welcome to a Genius Network interview that I know you're going to find fascinating and very valuable. Today I'm going to be doing an interview with Professor Tom McKaskill. So how are you, Tom? You're in Melbourne, Australia right now, and I'm in Tempe, Arizona. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely, yes. It's next day in the morning here, so I'm up early and you're up late.
Exactly, yeah. So it's like before we got started here, I asked you what time it was. You said 11 a.m. on Wednesday, and it's a little after 5 p.m. on Tuesday, so this is pretty funny. But if there's a delay in any of the speaking for anyone listening, just realize we are across the globe from each other right now. But nonetheless, the valuable content you're about to hear from me asking Dr. McKaskill some questions, I'm sure you'll find extremely valuable to your entrepreneurial venture. So let me go ahead and read your bio, Tom, and then I'll ask you some questions. So who is Dr. Tom McKaskill? A global serial entrepreneur, consultant and educator, and author. Dr. McKaskill is an established authority on how successful entrepreneurs start, develop, and harvest their ventures. Dr. McKaskill is acknowledged as the world's leading expert on exit strategies for high-growth enterprises. Over a 20-year period as an active entrepreneur, Dr. McKaskill's experience include multiple startups in the UK and USA, raising venture capital twice, undertaking 2 acquisitions, and strategic trade sales of 3 businesses. Recently retired from the Richard Pratt Chair in Entrepreneurship at the Australian Graduate School of Entrepreneurship, Dr. McKaskill is an author of 11 books for entrepreneurs covering such topics as new venture growth, raising venture capital, selling a business, acquisitions, strategy, and angel investing. He conducts workshops and seminars on these topics for entrepreneurs around the world. He has conducted workshops and seminars for educational institutions, associations, private firms, and public corporations, including KPMG, St. George Bank, AMP, AICD, and PwC. And those of you in America may not know of those companies, but those are the firms. His private strategic exit workshops for senior management teams, directors, and external investors is highly valued by venture capital firms, and Dr. McKaskill is a successful columnist and writer for popular business magazines and entrepreneur portals. So what else did I leave out about you, Tom, that would be useful for everyone to hear about before we get into talking about your expertise?
Well, I think that because you are based in the United States, I'm sure people would like to know that I actually spent 11 years in the U.S., 2 years in San Diego where I had bought a company and undertaken a turnaround. And then a few years later, I ended up in Atlanta, and I was in Atlanta for 9 years, firstly with one of my acquirers, and then secondly with a startup, and probably have visited almost all the states in the United States and certainly all the airports, but have had a lot of experience in the U.S. and know the country reasonably well.
Well, you know, I've been to Australia twice. I haven't been to Melbourne, where you're at right now, in over a decade. But I always found people in Australia to be amazingly friendly and just a really beautiful country. And from an entrepreneurial standpoint, what are the differences from your perspective of doing business in Australia versus in America, if there are any that you can identify?
You know, I think entrepreneurs are the same all over the world, but one of the things that happens here that's a bit of a problem for us is that we only have 21 million people. And so an entrepreneur that starts a business here really in the end hits a ceiling for how big the business that can grow in a domestic market. One of the great things about doing business in the United States is with such a huge domestic market, you know, even a very niche market, very specialized business, you know, has a real chance of growing to something significant. So I always tell my friends that it's actually easier to do business in the United States than in Australia.
Wow, interesting. Very cool. Well, that makes a lot of sense. And so, you know, I was introduced to your teachings by my good friend Richard Rossi, who is a very, very successful entrepreneur, and he told me, he said, you've got to do an interview with this guy. He is the world's leading expert on how to sell a business. And this was at one of my 25K group meetings, which is a group that I have for very, very successful entrepreneurs that make a net income of $1 million a year or more and invest over $25,000 a year just to be in the group and meet and do brainstorms. And so I think half the people in the group have read your books, The Ultimate Deal 1 and The Ultimate Deal 2, and you've just got some fascinating, very, very valuable work, and I want to talk to you a little bit about your expertise. And so do you mind if I launch into some questions for you?
Fantastic.
Okay, so let's start with something a little controversial. You've had a successful career as an entrepreneur, and so if you could tell me from your perspective, are entrepreneurs born or are they bred?
Well, I can tell you that I never met a child yet who said that they wanted to grow up to be an entrepreneur. And, even children with parents of entrepreneurs who often do go into business for themselves often start with very traditional careers. I think I fell into it and discovered I was very good at it, and I do subscribe to the view that entrepreneurs are born and not bred. However, I don't believe that natural entrepreneurs are born knowing anything about how to operate a business successfully.
If they don't know about business, then what does it mean to be an entrepreneur?
I think we're born with a range of talents, and life experiences decides whether we use them or not. So some people are born with musical or athletic talent. We know some people are gifted in math and music and languages. Some people have a real talent for art or design. I think the natural talents of the entrepreneur are in creating a vision, seeing market opportunities, gathering people around them to pursue a dream, accepting some level of risk, being optimistic and being pragmatic. Entrepreneurs are naturally creative in seeing ways of doing things in business. However, to be successful, they do need to learn about managing a business. Many do it through trial and error, and others through formal education, network, and reading. We can teach people entrepreneurial processes, but I have to tell you, in all honesty, from all my experience, we can't teach someone to be an entrepreneur.
Huh, interesting. Well, you say that you fell into being an entrepreneur. How did that happen for you?
Well, strange as it may seem, I started out like a lot of entrepreneurs by failing high school.
But I thought you had a doctorate from London Business School. Is that correct?
Yeah, true. But, that only happened many years later. I had a very disruptive childhood. I went to 22 schools by the time I was 10. My father never settled into civilian life after World War II and ended up dying from his war injuries when I was 10. I was farmed out to relatives for a year or so. My mother then remarried, and our family of 5 boys settled into Melbourne. And I spent the next 5 years at just one high school, which you have to say was a little different from going to 22 by the time I was age 10. I actually lost interest in school in my final 2 years of high school and ended up failing 4 of my 6 final year subjects.
Interesting. What's interesting about what you just said is that I moved every 2 years my entire childhood. I went to numerous different schools. My mother was a former teacher, and she actually died when I was 4 years old. So my father, who was an entrepreneur, a locksmith, he never made huge money doing it, but he was a guy that wanted to start up a business, and as soon as he get it established, he would either sell it or just dissolve it, and we'd move on to the next place. So just like you, I was all over the map when I was growing up, which I think in a lot of ways formulated who I am today. But anyway, so having gone through that experience, how did you end up as a university teacher?
Well, I effectively, dropped out of high school and went off to work for an insurance company at age 17, and I thought I'd made it. In fact, my family thought I'd done pretty well, even just getting a job at that age. And it was only some months later working for the insurance company that I realized just what a complete fool I'd been not to pay more attention in class and perhaps take the opportunity of going on further. So I took some additional exams and finally got into university. But then I found that the university environment really suited me, as I could take control of my own destiny. I think that's something that entrepreneurs really value. And it is a characteristic of all the entrepreneurs that I've taught over the years, is that they're not at university to get a piece of paper. They're at university to get knowledge. So I ended up doing a Bachelor of Economics, ended up doing a Master of Commerce in Accounting. I qualified as a CPA, became a university lecturer in accounting. And I thought at that stage that, I'd done pretty well, but at that time, there were no people in accounting in Australia and New Zealand who had doctorates. And I thought that doing a doctorate would really make a huge difference to my academic career. And so I ended up being accepted into a PhD program at the London Business School, which, as you probably know, is one of the top 4 business schools in the world.
Yeah, well, it's fantastic. So, well, you described in your profile as an entrepreneur, being an educator and author, and today you said you're said to be the world's leading authority on exit strategies for high-growth firms. So you were on track for a university career. So what actually happened?
Well, I thought that, having got my doctorate, I was really well set up. But we were in England, and what I discovered was that, academics in England don't get paid particularly well. And so I ended up, finishing the doctorate, but then going to work for a computer company in England for a couple of years. And at that stage, we then decided that we would go into business, and so ended up starting a software business, out of my dining room, and that effectively launched the next 20 years of my career. So here we were. We had started this small software business in our dining room, relocated to Northampton in England, and got into product development and sales and setting up distributors and so on. 12 years on, we had 160 employees. We had offices in Northampton and London in England and San Diego in the United States and Auckland in New Zealand. We had about a dozen distributors as well as our own sales force. To acquire the business in San Diego, we had raised venture capital and then later acquired one of our distributors. By 1990, we had decided to sell and eventually sold to a USA company which had recently listed on the NASDAQ, a company called Ross Systems.
Was that sale, Ross Systems, was that your first trade sale?
Yes, and I learned a lot from it, especially how to find the right buyer and create a compelling story about business potential. By the time of the sale, our business was declining due to the recession in the UK. So by the time we sold, we were just break even, and we were still paid about 1 times revenue, which is pretty remarkable. When you think about the way businesses are valued, a business which is basically either losing money or just breaking even to be paid 1 times revenue is pretty remarkable. However, when you look at what happened after the sale, the acquirer Ross Systems introduced our products into the United States and generated about 10 times our revenue in the first 18 months. So, they got a really good return on their acquisition investment. I then worked for Ross in Atlanta for 3 years as VP Marketing. And near the end of my stay with Ross, I formed a new company in Kansas with 2 others. And then we acquired some software rights from a New Zealand company which had been a former distributor of mine. We jointly spent about $20,000 to form the company. But the Kansas company was sold 6 months later for $1 million, although it had never traded.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good deal.
Well, the company had never done a single transaction, and so basically we received $1 million to buy back the U.S. rights to the software. And, you have to say that's an exceptional deal, and I wish I'd done a few more like that.
Oh, interesting. Okay, well, what happened after you did that?
I left Ross and started a new business with about a dozen people we recruited from Ross, and we decided to build a supply chain optimization software application for process manufacturers. So this was in Atlanta. We started out doing consulting and used the excess cash to build a new suite of software applications. About 2 years into this venture, a small company called Red Pepper was purchased by PeopleSoft for 25 times revenue, and we knew we were absolutely in a hot market.
Okay, so it was purchased for 20 times revenue, so that obviously using, your whole exit strategy methodology, that's a pretty fantastic exit. So how did PeopleSoft justify such a high price?
Well, I think this goes to the basis of how to create value for a buyer. What was happening at the time was PeopleSoft were in human resources and payroll software applications, and they really wanted to get into the manufacturing sector, which was the big emerging market, but they had absolutely no credibility in that market. So by acquiring Red Pepper, they brought themselves an icon product which gave them a foothold in the manufacturing market.
How did the Red Pepper sale help you?
Well, that was a great story, and what it told the venture capital community was that this was a hot market, and we were right there as a new startup in that market. So that allows us to raise $2 million in venture capital. Not bad for a business which only had revenues of about $500,000. We then used the VC money to complete the product suite and expand our business. Within 2 years, we had 30 staff, a revenue of $2 million and 20 customers. Then guess what? It all went south.
It all went south. Well, you were in a hot market at the time. So what went wrong?
You know, the big application software vendors such as, SAP, JD Edwards, and PeopleSoft decided to develop products in our market. So very soon we found ourselves with no prospects, losing $100,000 a month, and headed for insolvency.
Huh, interesting. Okay, so you had a business which was going nowhere and not really worth anything.
Well, on all the basis of the revenue and the profit and the fact that we were losing so much money and effectively going out of business, you'd have to say that using any conventional model, this business was dead. However, we put the business on the market, and within 2 weeks we sold it to PeopleSoft for $12 million.
For $12 million. Okay, so and here's where I want to get to, like, where your expertise is in what it is you teach. So you sell it for $12 million. How is that possible? Losing money, no prospects, and going out of business.
Well, I think what you see in these couple of examples is really the key to what a strategic sale model is. And the critical question for the vendor to ask is, what is it worth to the buyer? In our case, we were saying, what is this worth to PeopleSoft? Well, think about what they could do with our products. They had a customer base of about 2,000 customers, and they could sell our product suite into about half of them. The product would sell for about $250,000 with another $250,000 in implementation services. Our products were complete, fully proven, and documented. So what was this worth to them to buy a fully proven system instead of taking several years to develop one? Clearly a lot more than $12 million. Now, I have to say we basically gave it away. I mean, we were under a lot of pressure to survive. If only I knew now what I know, and if I could only go back and do the deal again, I actually think this deal should have been worth about $60 million. And if we'd only brought the other big software corporations into the bidding, I think that's what we could have got for a business.
Huh, interesting. Well, you still, do you consider yourself very lucky from what you got?
Oh, I don't think there's any question about that, but that's given what I knew at the time. But in hindsight, what I realized that I was well prepared, I had multiple bidders, although perhaps not the best ones. I also knew that they needed our products and they could make a lot of money from them.
Okay, well, your 3 trade sales have a lot in common. It seems that in each case, the buyer was in a very good position to exploit what they bought from you.
Joe, that's fantastic insight, because I think the question, or at least the statement you've made, is that the buyers could exploit it, and that's the key to strategic sale. So from this hindsight, what I've identified is what I call the strategic value. This is where a large corporation can quickly exploit an asset or capability from an acquisition.
And so is this the basis of your exit model?
Only partly, although it's absolutely critical. Why don't you give me a chance and I'll explain a little bit more about how the exit models work, and then you can see more about how they came about.
Okay, perfect. Please do.
So after I'd sold Distinction software business to PeopleSoft in 1999, I retired, as you do when you're cashed up. However, like a lot of entrepreneurs, I quickly became bored and I ended up going back teaching as a visiting professor of international business at Georgia State University. But while I was there, I was also involved in teaching international entrepreneurship, and it was through that subject that I was approached to apply for the chair in entrepreneurship at the Australian Graduate School of Entrepreneurship in Melbourne, in Australia. But this time I was divorced and it suited me to return to Australia. I was appointed the academic director of the Master of Entrepreneurship program, and this is the oldest master's level program in entrepreneurship in the world. Pretty fantastic when you think it's out of a small university in Australia. And then later, a couple of years later, I was promoted to the Richard Pratt Chair in Entrepreneurship, and then I retired from the university in 2008. And it was during this time that I was an academic and doing some research that I had the chance to reflect back on my experience, and I discovered that there was no theory of valuation or venture harvesting for high-growth firms which explained what happened to me, what happened in those trade sale premiums that I had generated. I also discovered that there was not a single research study which had been published on exit strategies for entrepreneurs. So over the next several years, I developed a theory of strategic exits and published this in several research conferences and then finally in a book for entrepreneurs.
Well, that's a pretty big transition from being an entrepreneur.
Well, remember I started my life as an academic, so the university environment was not so strange to me. And I will say that while I was something of an anomaly, you rarely see a combination of a practicing entrepreneur and senior academic in one person. I was very fortunate as an academic to have 20 years in business to ground me and give me the experiences which enabled me to see where I could make a contribution.
Well, will this strategic sale model of yours work for every business?
Well, sadly, no. I had some exceptional experiences, but when I reflected back on all the different businesses that I had been asked to advise on, what I could see was that it only works in very limited circumstances. It really only works where the venture has something which a large corporation can exploit over some period of time. So it has to have significant sustainable competitive advantage, such as you get from strong intellectual property or deep expertise. It also has to be highly scalable, so the large corporation can deploy it widely. Lastly, it has to have high growth potential in the hands of the buyer. And in all honesty, probably less than 5% of small businesses have assets or capabilities which fit this model.
Okay, well, that's kind of a pity, because there are a lot of entrepreneurs and even people listening to this to our conversation out there who need help selling their businesses.
Well, the good news is that there's 5% out there that could probably make a lot of money. However, Joe, seriously, I had exactly the same reaction as you did. It's only 5%, therefore it has limited applicability. And, I would talk to lots of entrepreneurs who really didn't have what it takes to generate the high prices associated with a strategic exit. But then I was determined to do something for them, and so I had a hard look at conventional valuation and developed what I would call another breakthrough. I discovered how a conventional business could generate a sale price 3 to 10 times the conventional valuation.
Well, that's pretty awesome. So, I know a lot of entrepreneurs who would love to find out how they could apply any methodology like that to their businesses, in their businesses. So what are some of the keys? What is the key to such a sale?
Well, basically it comes down to the potential of the business in the hands of the buyer. Sounds a bit familiar. Sounds just like the strategic sale. But this time the focus is on inherent growth. By that I mean that the value in the business is created by showing the buyer how the revenue and the profit within the business being sold can be increased quickly.
But isn't that what the entrepreneur is doing anyway, growing revenue and profit in their business?
Well, exactly. But what if I could find a set of prospective buyers who could exploit the potential in my business much better than I could? What if I could show them how to do it and prepare the business so I could make it easy for them?
So is it all about finding the right buyer?
Exactly. It's pretty obvious, isn't it? What I need to do is prepare my business to be exploited by a buyer who can do much more with the business than I can. Maybe they have access to more finance, better management, or they know how to overcome some of the obstacles limiting my business. Maybe they have more energy, or they may simply be smarter than me. The key to a high price is to work out the potential in your business and then find a buyer who can execute on that potential. Of course, you do want several competing bidders so you can push the final price up.
Gotcha. Okay, well, you said that you had retired from the university. Are you involved in another startup, or are you really retired?
Well, hey, what entrepreneur really retires? I think they just reinvent themselves, or as a lot of entrepreneurs say, I'm just between projects. I get to do a lot of fun stuff all the time, which is great. And fortunately for me, I met a wonderful lady who shares my life and my passion for all things entrepreneurial. After 8 years sitting through my workshops and editing my books, my partner, Cutland, knows as much about venture growth and exits that I do, and so we do everything together. And what we do is we do a lot of mentoring for younger entrepreneurs. We love to meet them in our coffee shop and have an hour with them talking about their business and giving them free advice. We just get these wonderful conversations with these people that we really like interacting with. And we've also become actively involved in the angel investing community and joined the Gold Coast and the Melbourne Angel Groups. And also I write a blog for a US-based angel group, which is the Pasadena Angels. And on top of that, I've developed a lot of additional material recently for angel investors, especially in the area for how to select and manage strategic value investments and how to position them for an exit. I'm still writing articles and books, and have recently tackled the task of setting up and managing my own website. So, when you say retired, not entirely, but, I do have a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I think you're totally right that what entrepreneur ever really retires? They just keep reinventing themselves, like you said. And I think it's super cool what you're doing with mentoring the younger entrepreneurs and just, setting up ongoing discussions. Well, Tom, I've been told that you've helped numerous entrepreneurs to sell their businesses at pretty significant premiums. So what do you do that is different from, say, a business broker or a business advisor?
I think it's a fundamental difference. I think the difference is that I start with the proposition that the future does not have to be the same as the past. So instead of looking at what the business is currently doing and projecting that forward, I ask the question, what could a buyer do with this business? So what I ask the entrepreneur to do is to look inside the business to see what the business could do in the hands of a very capable buyer. I like to have them build a picture of what the business might look like, not what it currently is. And once we know what the potential of the business is, the task is then to go find the right buyer.
What do you mean by the right buyer? Isn't that simply the one that'll, pay the highest price for the business?
Yeah, but that's somewhat random. Basically, the strategy says that if the path that you need to take to get the highest price is to establish who bids for the business in the first place, and then what we want to do is we want to decide in advance who we want in the bidding, not just advertise the business and hope that some buyers will turn up. So we want a buyer who really understands how to exploit the underlying potential of the business. Then they need to have the capability and the capacity to do so. So we're also looking for a buyer who can quickly exploit the underlying potential. We want a buyer who has experience in acquisitions. We also obviously want multiple potential buyers so we can construct a competitive bid so we can achieve the highest price.
I like what you just said about, finding a buyer who understands how to exploit the potential of the business, and then they need to have the capability and capacity. So how do you find the best buyer? I mean, how would you do it?
Well, I think the traditional business broker, prepares an information memorandum or an offer to sell, and then they advertise the business. And I don't do that at all. What I do is I try to work out who the best buyers are in advance. So in order to get the highest price, you need to identify these potential buyers in advance. You need to build a relationship with them so they understand the potential in the business. And then you need to position your business for sale with each of your selected buyers. So this is a very proactive strategy. It can take some time because you've got to identify the buyers, connect with them, educate the buyers in the potential of business, and then eventually set it up for a strategic sale or financial sale, but set it up into a competitive bid so that those buyers who now know how they can exploit the business are now prepared to step up to the plate and bid for it.
Gotcha. So do you prepare the business for sale any differently under your model compared to, how other people would maybe even know how to set up a business for sale?
Well, there's a lot of conventional wisdom about how to prepare the business for sale, and much of the preparation that I recommend is the same. But the difference is that the entrepreneur stays focused on how they're going to enable the buyer to exploit the potential, and this drives a lot of the preparation work. So what I ask them to do is I ask them to clean up the business, reduce the risks, and make it more efficient for the buyer. We want the buyer to move in quickly to capture the potential in the business, so we need to remove any obstacles to that. I also want to have the business prepared so that the buyer due diligence is completed quickly so that the deal can be finalized as soon as possible. Seriously, nothing kills a deal like problems uncovered during due diligence.
Okay, so if due diligence can be a problem, what's the best way of preparing for that?
Well, the best approach I've ever seen is for the entrepreneur to undertake a vendor due diligence first. So this is where the entrepreneur brings in their own accountants and lawyers and asks them to undertake a due diligence as if they were working for a potential buyer. This then gives the entrepreneur a chance to get all the documents in order, install any new systems which are needed, and fix any problems, so that when the real buyer due diligence comes along, the entrepreneur is then fully prepared.
Okay, so should they use a business broker or an advisor along the way?
Few entrepreneurs have ever sold a business, so many people that I talk to have never had that experience, and some maybe once but never several times. So I think it's always worth having the services of someone who's got considerable experience in selling and buying businesses, because there are lots of things you need to do to prepare the business. However, I think the entrepreneur should take charge of this process themselves and only work with advisors who are on the same page as they are. You know, don't let the advisor drag them back into conventional thinking. Don't let them take you back to EBIT multiple. Don't let them take you back to look at your profit and loss and your balance sheet, because the value that you create is in the hands of the buyer, and it's always in the future. It's never what you've done in the past. So what I say is you want to work with people who've got experience, but you want to work on the potential of the business, not just its history.
Gotcha. And I think that's great, because conventional thinking in so many cases, even what I do in the world of marketing, is not the best way to get the job done, as is the case here, which you've identified in your expertise in selling a business. So let me mention this. I mean, many entrepreneurs, they think about selling their businesses when they retire, and you seem to be suggesting that people do it earlier.
You know, I think you should always consider selling the business, even right from the time you set it up. And I have to say that now that I've looked at this problem, for many years through many businesses, what I've discovered is that few entrepreneurs choose when their business gets sold. Many have to sell because their business gets into trouble, or they need to deal with personal health or family issues. They usually don't choose the timing, so being prepared to sell at any time will help protect value in the business. Often they get approached with an offer, but they're not prepared for the discussion and either don't know what the business is worth or have not thought about how to put the business into a competitive bid to generate the highest price. And you can only get the best price if you're well prepared for the discussion whenever it occurs or whenever you have to sell the business.
Gotcha. Well, so what about those that enjoy what they're doing and aren't under any pressure to sell?
Well, I say good luck. If you've got a good business that's generating a good income and you're enjoying what you do, but let's look at the alternative. What if you could take some money off the table and cash up, put some money aside for your retirement and for your children's education? The good ones, they'll simply go out and start another business, become an angel investor, or devote more time to their family and helping others. And serial entrepreneurs have several businesses through their careers. So they'll sell one and they'll do another one and they'll do another one. And there's huge joy and benefit in doing that. But think about the real benefit in having a nest egg behind you which ensures a comfortable life and financial security. There are no guarantees in business. Just because you're profitable today and growing does not mean that you'll be next year or in 5 years' time. It's always worth thinking about what you might do if you were cashed up.
What about loyal employees? Do you think the entrepreneurs owe them something for the contribution that they've had working in the business, and if you're going to sell it?
Absolutely, without a question. You don't get to be a successful entrepreneur by yourself. Entrepreneurs create wealth by building organizations, and that means, the team, the employees, all the people that help make it successful. But in fact, if we look at sales in hindsight, what you do find is that a good sale can reward everyone. Those with shares and options can cash up. There can be bonuses for key staff at the time of the sale to reward them for assisting with the due diligence, preparing the business for sale. Those who no longer wish to stay can have a bonus on leaving, and those who do stay can be paid a retention bonus to stay and help with the transition to new ownership. In fact, if you choose the right buyer, remember we're selling the business on the basis of potential. So if we choose the right buyer who's there to exploit the potential in the business, they actually need the employees to be there to develop that potential. So employees often have better careers with the buyer, especially if the buyer wishes to develop the business early. So selling need not be a negative move. In fact, it can be a very positive move where everybody comes out really well, especially if the sale was planned well, the buyers were selected in advance, and the business was correctly positioned so that the business has a very good future in the hands of the acquirer.
Gotcha. What about the entrepreneur that is selling the business? They might want to stay with the business after they sell it.
Well, the reality is that entrepreneurs make really bad employees. And so, they like to think that they can make decisions whenever they want to. The classic entrepreneur makes a decision in the shower in the morning or over coffee or before breakfast, and you cannot do this in a larger organization. They don't want to be accountable. They don't like to wait for others to tell them what to do. So most smart buyers terminate the services of the founder. And don't forget that at the same time that the selling entrepreneur is now cashed up, and they might have a very different view of life after the sale, and may have a whole lot of things that they want to do once the weight of responsibility is off their shoulders. They may wish to have a break, take a world cruise, spend some time with their family, or start another venture. But probably what they don't want to do is they don't want to be somewhere down in a large organisation having to take instructions and to be accountable.
Well, since the business is many entrepreneurs like their baby, it must be pretty confronting to them to just let go of it.
Absolutely. In fact, we often define ourselves by the business we have. So, an entrepreneur will often say, I'm a software executive or I'm a retail executive. But when you look at serial entrepreneurs have a very different view of life. Each business contributes to their wealth, but they see themselves as an entrepreneur first rather than as an owner of a specific business. Seriously, the key when you're selling a business is to have a plan for what you do after the sale, so that there's a planned transition for you through the sale and into your next activity.
So, Tom, if you had to give a couple of key points to entrepreneurs who are thinking about selling their business, what would the main points be?
I seriously think it starts with education. So you need to read books and articles, you need to talk to professional service providers who work in this area, and you need to speak to entrepreneurs who've sold their business. The next step is to work out what you have or do which can create an opportunity for a buyer. So look inside your business and try to work out what a potential buyer could take away from the business which they could exploit, and then turn these into the critical messages for when you're in front of a buyer. And then take the time out to prepare the business so that the buyer sees a compelling proposition.
Gotcha. Well, so you're obviously the expert in this area, Tom, and you've written a whole bunch of books. And so what should they read of yours just that could help them on what we've talked about so far? And then I'm going to continue to ask you some more questions to go deep with this.
Well, I've written a lot of articles over the last few years, probably several hundred articles. And many of these are on some websites. You can look at, for example, www.smartcompany.com.au, which is an e-journal site for entrepreneurs. I've probably got a couple of hundred articles there. I have some articles on the Pasadena Angels site, and then obviously I've got some on my own site. I'm starting to create websites for each of my books now, and so the new book which I have coming out, which is the replacement for the Ultimate Deal 1 and Ultimate 2 deals that you talked about before. This is an e-book. It's called Ultimate Exits, and it's on www.ultimateexits.com, and there's a whole series of articles up there as well. So Ultimate Exits would be very relevant for an entrepreneur thinking about how to position their business for sale. It deals with both the financial exits, which is the inherent value, as well as the strategic exits. And that book can be purchased from my site, ultimateexits.com.
Gotcha. And your main site is tommckaskill.com, T-O-M-M-C.
That's great. tommckaskill.com is my personal site. It has all my books up there, and it has a few articles. But as I said, I'm going to try to develop specific websites for each of the books. I've just launched a new book on acquisitions, which is on a website called ultimateacquisitions.com. I have a new book on the 14 principles of high-growth businesses, which is going out on a website in a couple of weeks, which will be called ultimategrowthstrategies.com. And then I have a bunch of books for angel investors and entrepreneurs seeking to raise angel and venture capital investment. And those books are available for free download off the Pasadena Angels website.
Gotcha. Well, so I'm going to come back to again and mention the site, the ultimateexits.com, and just remind everyone, because you have got a enormous amount of great material here for positioning, selling a business, and just on entrepreneurship in general. You could probably spend all your time doing nothing but either helping people set up businesses to sell or, doing it yourself. You have such an interest in teaching. What's that all about? Where does that come from?
I started life as an academic, and so I guess you never quite forget your basic foundation. But But, I have this, I don't think it's a unique ability, but I have a really good ability to be able to see patterns in things. And I think it's the good academic is able to take a complex situation or a complex problem and bring it down to a set of basics and to be able to describe it in simple terms and in some simple diagrams. And I think it was sitting there as an academic trying to figure out what to research on that I stumbled across this interest in selling a business. And it's in reflecting back across 20 years as an entrepreneur and wondering, why did certain things happen to me that were either mistakes or successes, and then, figuring that out and getting some insights and then saying, hang on, I think I've actually got something here. How would this sound if I put it in front of a class? What I got was really good feedback. And so I started to develop these models for growing a business, acquiring a business, selling a business, and then gradually it sort of took over my life. But what I find is that because I can bring these really quite complex processes down to a very few simple rules, is that I love seeing people just absolutely light up and get energized when I show them how to create really good businesses or show them how to extract really great value from their business. So I guess you never get away from being the teacher.
Yeah. Well, it's a great way, and like you mentioned in the beginning of the Ultimate Deal too, I mean, kind of going through the process, you actually discovered along the way new additional insights and new models, and no one really had put it together in any way, shape, or form anywhere near like the way you have, and nor have I seen anyone else even describe selling a business this way. And so I want to ask you, just kind of go deep on what we just talked about, some differences and some definitions of things. For instance, like what would be if you could define a financial sale and then a strategic sale, although you've kind of described it, I'd like to have you elaborate on it a bit more.
Okay. Well, the concept behind the financial sale is the sort of classic conventional business that typically sells on an EBIT multiple. And the reason they do that is because the value that they're creating for the buyer is inherent ability to generate revenue and profit. So the buyer is not going to take any substantial synergies out of that business at all. And if they're going to get a return on their investment, they're going to have to get it from the business that they've bought. So that business has a set of resources and products and market positions, and it's going to have to generate revenue and profit in its own right in order to generate a return for the buyer. That's the financial sale. It's all about inherent revenue and profit generation. Now, if we switch across to a strategic sale, it's dramatically different. What I have in my business is some asset or some capability. So intellectual property, deep expertise, a distribution network, a set of management, a set of skills, a location. Doesn't really matter what it is, but what I'm doing is I'm offering it to a giant corporation, and I'm saying, you have the capability, you've got the customer base, you've got the distribution network, you can overcome my constraints. You can take this little thing that I have and you can do it 20, 50, 100 times better than me. And so the value that's being created in the sale is not the business growing bigger, but it's the giant corporation taking what you've got and exploiting it on just a massive scale. So when we look at strategic sale, we're looking for something that creates serious competitive advantage in the hands of the buyer, that the buyer has the capability and the capacity to exploit it, but it also must be highly scalable so that they can exploit it on a large scale. And so what you see is little businesses that have these assets or capabilities, and what you say to them is, don't grow. It's not about your revenue. It's not about your profit. It's not about getting more customers or more distribution channels. It's about packaging up that value, that strategic value you've got, and going and finding the right buyer that can exploit this on a massive scale. Now, that's a strategic value sale.
Now, so in a lot of ways, would you actually recommend to people to completely rethink why and how they're in business in the first place? You know, from a money-making standpoint, it seems to me that the big payday is when you make the sale. And if you spent your time as a business owner really developing and growing and building the business, uniquely packaging it around a strategic sale to another company instead of just figuring out how to sell more of the products and services, that from a financial standpoint, you'd be in a much better position if that was your mindset and that was your plan going in. Is that correct?
Pretty much. I mean, I think that all entrepreneurs should focus on the exit anyway, whether they've got a financial sale or a strategic sale, because you never simply know what's going to happen to your business. But if you can move your business from a financial exit to a strategic exit, you can dramatically increase the potential sale value of the business. So instead of, pushing the business forward, finding the next customer, finding the next distribution channel, developing more strategic partners, if you looked inside your business and you basically said, okay, what do I do really well, and what have I got or what have I have that a giant corporation can exploit? And in many cases, that will create many, many times the exit value than you could if you simply just kept growing your business. So absolutely, if you can move your business from a financial value creator to a strategic value creator, you're going to be many times better off.
Yeah, which is great, and which is why I highly encourage everyone, even if they don't even have it in their mind of selling their business, which I think would be almost next to impossible after listening to us at this point. But let's just say that they needed like a roadmap in order to set this thing up. I mean, that's what your books basically are. They give people an exact roadmap on how to do this. So aside from, even in your books, you make the recommendations of, hiring a professional advisor or a business broker if they're aligned with looking at the potential of a business. You pretty much have laid out this roadmap in your books. And the thing that's so fascinating about how valuable it is, I think there's a lot of people out there that would probably, if people did not know you existed, Tom, that would charge tens of thousands of dollars for a map that you pretty much lay out in a book, and it probably wouldn't be as complete and as well thought out and as well defined as your actual books are.
Oh, I think that's absolutely true. I think there's an awful lot of very conventional professional advice out there which just, feeds a conventional model of the business. And what I ask entrepreneurs to do is to make a complete paradigm shift. So, in the new book, the Ultimate Exits book, the first chapter says, forget the EBIT multiple. And when you say that to an entrepreneur who's been busy growing their business and you say, forget the EBIT multiple because that will never get you the value that you can create in your business. And they're really shocked, because if we look at our professional training through accounting and finance and just business management, everything that we've been taught is about how to grow a business with revenue and profit increases over time, because that's what creates value. Now, if you go and shake them and you say, but actually that's not true. Yes, that creates a certain amount of value, but think about the buyer. What is the buyer buying? The buyer's not buying history. The buyer's buying what they can do with the business. Your job is to change the future of your business, not in your hands, but in the hands of the buyer. So let's focus on the buyer and work backwards. And I'll often say to entrepreneurs, look, you're really good at building a product, building a widget, and you're great at going out and finding the right customer, the customer that has a need for it, the customer that sees real value in the product, and that's the customer that will pay the highest price. Why don't you do the same with your business? Your business is just a product. You've got to create value in the business for the buyer. Put yourself in the shoes of the buyer and work backwards.
I love what you just said, that your business is the product. Instead of thinking of the products or the services that the business sells, your thinking is start thinking of your business as the product so you can set it up for the buyer. That's a much bigger conversation than I think ever enters the minds of many business owners.
Absolutely. And, I said to you that sometimes it's just getting back to basics, that whether you're growing a business or buying a business or selling business, sometimes you just have to come back to these basics. And what the basics will do, particularly if it's a breakthrough concept, that concept will change the way you see business forever. And when I run my workshops on strategic value, particularly with high-tech entrepreneurs, these people know that they've got tremendous potential in their business, but they don't have the resources or the energy or the funds to be able to execute on it, but they know it has potential. And what they can't see is how do they extract the value for that potential. And when I present them with the strategic model, what they do is, that I've seen people jump out of their chairs and say, that's it. I always knew this business was worth a lot of money, but I could never convince my accountant. I could never convince my lawyer. But what this does is this tells me what I've always known, but I've never been able to see it articulated as well as this, and now I know what I have to do.
Exactly. And this reminds me, I had a conversation with a good friend of mine by the name of Dean Jackson, and he has another friend who's also a close friend of mine named Eben Pagan. And I don't know if you know these guys, but in America, they're very smart internet marketers. And I'm pretty much like an idea guy. I come up with lots of ideas. I think the vast majority of them are pretty darn good, and many that have made people millions of dollars when they've employed them, including myself. And I was having this conversation with Dean about him and Eben have been having this kind of debate over what's more important, execution or ideas. And Dean made this comment that the only thing that will improve flawless execution is a better idea. And your model of a strategic sale, I think, is just one of those ideas, and it goes beyond an idea, obviously. It's a whole mindset, and I think when a business owner hears this, I think many that are listening to us and have heard this, me interview you here, will find this to be a huge aha, like, wow, I never quite thought of it that way. And that's why I'm going to so highly encourage people to read your books, because that's exactly the mind shift that I think will take place, and this could change the entire course and direction of someone's life, because so many entrepreneurs, their business encompasses so much, if not the vast majority, of their waking life. And this gives many people an opportunity to go to better places, escape limitations, make a tremendous amount of money, and potentially save countless years and maybe decades of going down what wouldn't have been the right path for them.
What I think is interesting is that actually my models are actually easier to execute, because when you think about the concept of potential in the business, if you can create potential for the buyer, often the potential can be created relatively easily because you're not the one that's going to execute on it. So when you create potential in the business, whether it's financial potential or strategic potential, what you're looking for is you're looking for the buyer that can execute on it. So you're looking for someone that has the capacity and the capability to exploit what you've created in your business. So you no longer have to do the exploiting part, which means that you can concentrate your time on survival and just packaging the business to be able to identify and then package more potential in the business. And that's what you're going to sell. And that, believe me, is an entirely different paradigm than what our conventional wisdom says, because our conventional wisdom says that the buyer will never pay for potential in a business. And I've had this conversation with many professional service providers and lawyers, and when I've shown them my model, which says that if you can show clearly how the business can be exploited, if you've got the evidence to show the buyer how the buyer's going to make a lot of money out of your business, that's part one. Part two is now you need a bunch of them all to bid for it. And it's in the competitive bidding that the potential gets paid for. So, yeah, look, it's a big idea. It's a big idea, but what it is it's a big idea that makes absolute sense to the people who are operating businesses.
Yeah, and let me mention this too. Even if someone does not make a strategic sale, I mean, you teach people how to sell a business. I mean, the 5% that would make a strategic sale, the other 95% can also learn better ways to position and set up how to sell a business in general, right? I mean, you pretty much encompass everything as it relates to exiting the business.
Well, that's why I developed the financial exits. And, I was very concerned sitting in my workshop with a bunch of people who clearly didn't have strategic value. And I felt very sorry for them because, I was able to create these staggering exit prices with strategic value, and yet, these people were coming along and paying to be in my workshop, and I had to say to them, sorry, you don't have strategic value. And that's when I went back and I looked at the conventional model, and I just had this absolute breakthrough, which said, what if the business had more potential than I could realize? What if the buyer could exploit the potential? How do I then take that potential and get paid for it? And so that was the model that I developed for financial exits. And it will still get you, 2 to 10 times the conventional value.
Yes, exactly. And plus, one of the things which you point out in your books that I've read is that even if someone doesn't think about selling their business, I mean, if it still hasn't, sunk in that this would be a good path to go down financially, by going through and planning it for selling it, you're going to be doing all the things that you need to do anyway just to simply have a much better, more effectively run business, from cleaning up messes to having better management in place to identifying the capabilities and the limitations you have. So just pursuing the path of selling a business is going to simply make any business better. Is that accurate?
Oh, absolutely, without a question. But in fact, it actually goes further than that because, it is about good governance, it is about good systems, it is about cleaning up the business, it is about putting monitoring systems in so you manage the business better. But in fact, when you go back to look at how potential is created, it goes back to what I call the growth drivers. And so if you now go back into what creates growth and look at the 14 principles of high growth businesses, which I've outlined in my book, The Ultimate Growth Strategies, these are the fundamental things that any business can exploit inside their business and in their product market that will create value. Whether that value is created in a financial way so that you get high revenues, better profits, better salaries, and finally a better exit value, or whether it's showing you where to put your effort to create strategic value. All of these principles come back to how you create growth and how you execute on growth potential. So yes, absolutely, always back to the fundamentals, and whether you want to run the business forever and just have a good life, these underlying principles will help you run a much better business, grow more, generate more profit, and certainly create better exit values.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask you a couple of basic questions, and then I'm going to encourage people the next steps from my perspective, and then ask you what your perspective is to continue down this path of putting it all together. You mentioned the term scalability a lot. What does that actually mean? What's your definition of scalability?
If you look at a business and you said to the entrepreneur, tell me how this business could be 10 times, 20 times, 50 times larger, what would that business look like, and what would your product and service mix look like? What would your distribution channels look like? What would your strategic partners look like? You can learn an awful lot about the way the business should be developed in order to build a larger business. But scalability is a slightly different concept. What I want with scalability is I want to do more and more business with the same unit of business resources. So what allows me to rapidly produce more products and get them into the marketplace? What allows me to rapidly replicate parts of my business, without spinning out of control? So there's a whole bunch of principles behind scalability that we want to look at, because scalability underpins high growth and underpins strategic value. For example, it's much easier to scale a business around standard products than customized products. It's much easier to scale a business which is product-based than service-based. It's much easier to scale a business when you can bring in strategic partners than do it by yourself. It's much easier to scale a business when you can sell multiple products to the same customer rather than have to go to the next customer. So there's a whole bunch of principles that underpin the concept of scalability, which you really want to look at for growing the organization, developing new products, developing new markets, understanding where the impediments for growth are that you really need to look at.
Yes, and you had actually mentioned in the Ultimate Deal 2 where you could have parts of the company that you could actually piece out, basically, not your exact words, but you can sell parts of the business and retain another part of the business for things that give a strategic buyer an advantage. So people really can look at their business and in a lot of ways maybe unbundle parts of it and sell those different parts for a lot of money while still staying in the business they're in. Could you describe that or elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, I think the concepts are either the split sale or the multiple sale or the staged exit. So let me take each one of those. So the split sale would say, looking at my business, there's no one buyer that can fully exploit all the products and services in my business. And in fact, what I'm actually in is I'm actually in more than one market. And so what I need to do is I need to spin out each part of the business so that I get the right buyer for that part of the business. So, for example, if I'm in human products and animal products, it's unlikely I'll find one buyer that will fully exploit both those markets. So what I should do is split my business into two and then, sell them into the two markets. The next one is what I call multiple exits. So where I've got an underlying intellectual property which can be used in more than one market. So maybe it can be used in the defence market and maybe it can be used in the sort of typical pleasure market. Now, again, there's no one buyer that probably works in both those markets. So what I should do is I should package up the intellectual property in such a way that I exclusively license it for the defence market for one buyer and then license it for the pleasure market for another buyer. Now, another concept is what I call staged exits, where you may not have the capability or the capacity in order to prepare all the bits of the business for sale at the same time. And so what you do is you choose one part of the business. So while you're running the most of the business, you choose one part and you effectively package that for sale, spin it out, create a vehicle that you can sell it off to a buyer, and you can either take the funds back to the shareholders or back into the original business, and then you simply do the next bit. And this is great for entrepreneurs who don't want to let go. So they can choose a part of the business that they really want to hang on to and then find a way of carving out segments of the business and packaging them up and exit them and take the value. And, hey, you can have a great life doing this for quite a while.
Yeah, absolutely. And now I have a couple of billionaires that listen to my interviews, and I have a ton of people that are just very small operations, including, mom and pop operations. And so for people that are running obviously really small operations and they don't have a big staff, it may seem just a monumental task of preparing a business for sale because they're so busy in their business. What would be your advice to those types of people that don't have a large staff, that really until they listen to us talk, on this interview, that this is even a possibility? Where would they start?
It gets back to basics. Take your time. If you understand how to create value for the buyer, you don't have to do it in a week or a month or even a year. In fact, what I normally do is I say to my entrepreneur colleagues, I say, look, you need to think of this as an 18-month to 2-year project, and in the background, just go through the task of cleaning up the business, putting the systems in, getting it more efficient, getting it more effective, and then as a parallel task, which really doesn't take a lot of time, start thinking about who the potential buyers are, and then start connecting to them through trade exhibitions or conventions or charity events and so on, until you get you've got half a dozen potential buyers that you're interested in, and do a little bit of wining and dining until you can position the business for sale. And then look, if you have tremendous potential in the business, it's always possible to go and raise some angel investment money that will come in specifically to help you prepare the business for sale. So, I'm working now with probably a dozen entrepreneurs. They've all got relatively small businesses, 3 people to a dozen people. Their current business probably not worth more than $500,000 to $2 million. But each one of these businesses has a potential strategic exit of somewhere between $30 million and $100 million. And each one of them needs about $300,000 to $500,000 to correctly position the business for sale and get someone on a plane who can do a serious activity of getting in front of global companies and get this thing sold over a 18 months to 2 year period. So, there is more than one way to skin the cat and get this thing done.
Well, can you be hired to help someone sell a business?
I have to say that I'm retired, and I do enjoy getting up late and going out and having coffee and reading the paper, and I don't like working very hard. But this is all about smarts. This is all about really understanding this problem and using your wisdom and not a lot of your time. So for the entrepreneurs that I really like and I trust and I are open to a new idea but have this tremendous strategic value, what we say to them, and we only do it for a few, we'll say to them, look, you can have unlimited access to my time and emails and conversations, and what I'll do is I'll sit down and I'll work out exactly how this business can do a strategic sale, and you give me a percentage on the exit, because believe me, if I can't get you 2, 10, 20, 50 times more than someone else can get for this business, you shouldn't work with me. And so, they've signed up with me as a sort of professional advisor, but, we only succeed if they succeed, and believe me, I'm looking forward to making these people a lot of money.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, there's so much more that I could ask you. You have so much wisdom that are in your books. For the people that are listening, the business owners out there, to prepare to sell their business, amongst the other things that you've written about, you have a book called Winning Ventures, 14 Principles of High Growth Businesses. Where would you recommend people start? Maybe that it's not a question that you could easily answer, but for people that this is like a whole new thing, this is the first time they ever heard of Tom McKaskill, and they happen to listen to our conversation, and where would you recommend that they start? With what books, or what would you do if you were not you, but you were advising somebody?
Sure. Now, and I will be honest with you that as an entrepreneur, I will tell you that entrepreneurs have very short attention spans. And believe me, if they could get my book in a pill, I'm sure they'd much rather do that than have to read the book. But unfortunately, they will have to read the book.
Right.
But what we do know about entrepreneurs is they're very focused on the problem of the moment. And so an entrepreneur that's about to do an acquisition really wants advice on acquisitions. The one that wants to grow their business wants to focus on growth. The one that is thinking of selling the business wants to focus on selling. So it's not like you can say, here's some fundamentals, go read this, and then let's start thinking about what happens next. So what I say to them is that the basic principles in all my books is a pragmatic process for where you are at the moment and where you want to move to. So if you want to do acquisitions, go look at my book, Ultimate Acquisitions. If you want to grow the business, look at my book, Ultimate Growth Strategies. If you want to exit the business, look at the book, Ultimate Exits. If you want to become an angel investor, I have this phenomenal book, which is called Invest to Exit, which is just a whole breakthrough paradigm for the way that you can do angel investing. And that book's available free from the Pasadena Angels website. So, look, go to my website and just read the free articles. And I think what you'll see there is some stuff that will give you things that you can do next morning in your business. And I guess that, when I was teaching entrepreneurs, what I realized is that that's what they wanted. They wanted, give me something I can use tomorrow. And then, if I like what I hear and it works, then, I'll start, thinking about what else have you got and what else can I read. And a lot of people, they buy everything. Once they've figured out that I can help them, they'll just consume everything that I've ever written. And a lot of these people become lifelong friends.
Okay, now, Tom, this is a very special bonus that added to the very end of our interview, and you've got 6 e-books that you're going to make available for all of my Genius Network subscribers, and we're going to have them at a very special place where people can go and download these e-books absolutely free, and that's geniusnetwork.com/Tom McKaskill, spelled TOMMCKASKILL. So what are the topics of the 6 e-books?
Okay, well, let's start with the basics, which is how to grow your business, and that book is Ultimate Growth Strategies, and that will cover the 14 principles of high-growth businesses. So Ultimate Growth Strategies is the growth book. If you want to buy a business, there's a book that I have written called Ultimate Acquisitions. That's Ultimate Acquisitions. And that really looks at the whole problem of acquisitions from the high-growth entrepreneur point of view. So rather than a sort of one-size-fits-all, this is a tremendously powerful model for people to be able to identify the type of business they should be buying and then how to structure the entire evaluation, negotiation, management of the acquisition. If you want to sell a business, as we've discussed, the book is called Ultimate Exits, and that deals with both the financial exit type sale as well as the financial exits, and has a lot of checklists and processes in there which someone can use to prepare and set their business up for a sale. For someone, the entrepreneur that wants to raise venture capital or angel investment, I have a book called Raising Angel and Venture Capital Finance. It's really a very pragmatic way of looking at the whole venture capital and angel market and the way in which the entrepreneur, really has to fit in with the agendas of those investors, but how they position their company for investment and how they work with the angel or the venture capital firm through to the exit and the harvest for both the entrepreneur and the investor. For someone who's interested in being an angel investor, I have a book called An Introduction to Angel Investing, and it really is a book designed for the high net worth individual, often the cashed up entrepreneur, who is thinking about becoming an angel investor but really is not too sure how the whole process works. And this is a really great introduction into how angel groups work, how angels find deals, how they evaluate deals, and then how they negotiate and manage an investee firm. Lastly, one of the great breakthrough books that I recently did was a book called Invest to Exit, and that's a book about how angel investors and venture capital investors need to evaluate firms for investment. So before you get into the investment, figure out what the exit is, and more particularly, look for strategic exits. So it's a book on how to identify strategic value, how to package the business for the exit, and then how to manage it all the way through until both the entrepreneur and the investor get their money back. So these are highly pragmatic books. They're documenting lots of interesting theories and models that I've built over the last few years, but believe me, they really work. I've had a lot of good feedback from the early versions, and what I've done is I've now recreated these as ebooks, and I'd love your listeners to take these and go do wonderful things with the information.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it, and this is such a huge gift to everyone, and so go to geniusnetwork.com/Tom McKaskill, again spelled TOMMCKASKILL, and that will be a fantastic gift for you, and I know you'll get tremendous value out of it. And all I ask is that please give me your feedback after you've read them and on the success that you get from Tom's material, and I will certainly let him know. And in a future conference that I do, if there's ever an opportunity in the future where it makes sense, I'd love to have you come and present to my group, Tom. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. I hope that people can use this information and have wonderful and successful and rewarding and enriching entrepreneurial lives.
Thank you, Tom. I really, really appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure.
Hello, this is Joe Polish. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this interview. I hope you found it very useful. Please give me your feedback on all of the interviews that you listen to. I'd love to hear your feedback so we can always deliver a great program for you. Our website is www.joepolish.com, and we also have a Joe Polish Recommends section, so you can take a lot of the ideas and concepts that you hear on my Genius Network interview series and apply them to your business and find vendors and resources. You can go to joepolish.com to find that information and click on the Joe Polish Recommends section. And also, if you would like to find out about more interviews and invest in more useful Genius Network series interviews, go to www.geniusnetwork.com. Thanks, and eat your competition alive.